This story was told to me by my friend Lucy. At the time, she lived in an army town and worked for many summers at a restaurant popular with the officers and their families. At this particular restaurant, which is on the higher end, there's a table reserved for high-ranking officers who visit the base. People who work there refer to it as the table. On busier nights, when there isn't a higher-ranking officer in town, it's utilized to seat more patrons, but for the most part, it's left alone. It's Friday, so it's busy. There is a general visiting the base, so the table isn't being used just in case he decided to grace the establishment with his presence. Lucy is manning her section when the owner, named John for the purposes of this story, waves her down. She heads over and he tells her, "I need you and Annie, another server, to help me man the table." "The general is coming," she asked. "No, Brad is." Lucy rolled her eyes. Brad was a local bigwig's high school-aged son, and he had it in his mind that he was a hotshot. He frequented the restaurant with his girl of the week and proceeded to make a nuisance of himself. Every time, but not enough to the point that he was asked to leave. Lucy asked John, "Are you sure? What if the general wants to eat dinner with us?" At this, John leaned in with a wide smile and said apparently the general called and told us to give Brad the table and to give him and his guests anything he wanted. Lucy then smiled as she realized what was about to happen. Brad was about to get a serving of malicious compliance on the house. 20 minutes later, Brad, wearing a West Point blazer, arrives with several young people. John makes a big show of greeting them and escorting them to the table. The people look around, impressed, and Brad proceeds to command Lucy, John, and Annie around like he owns the restaurant. The only good thing about this particular experience was that due to him being underaged, Brad and his buddies never tried to order any alcohol. Brad proceeded to be a nuisance, demanding more appetizers, sending food back because it wasn't cooked just right, ordering the most expensive entrees on the menu, yada, yada, yada. Lucy, Annie, and John continue with this, smiling as more and more food is added to the table. It's time for the check. Lucy told me that the entire group managed to rack up $843.29, not counting the mandatory gratuity because the party is above a certain size. Brad gets the bill, and he flips out. "What is this?" he barked, waving the check. "It's your check." John said, "The general said to let you order anything you wanted." Brad stands up to argue, and that's when the host rushes up, her face white. "John, the general is here," she whispered. Everyone turns to look, and there's the general with his entourage. John excuses himself before going over. He and the general start to talk for a few minutes, and Lucy notices Brad turning white and starting to get out of his seat. Annie looked at him and said, "You better not try a dine and dash." She said, "I really don't want to have to sick these nice officers on you." Brad sat down and fidgeted. John and the general come back to the table. Making eye contact with Brad, John said, "Brad, you said the good general here insisted you have the table and that you can order anything you want. Is this true?" He only nodded. "Well, the general here said that he never made no such phone call." "That's odd," Brad said before looking at the general. "I'm pretty sure it was you I talked to." Sir, I have the phone number. Let's call it," John said, pulling out his cell phone and dialing a number. That's when they hear Brad's brand new cell phone going off in his pocket. The general held his hand out, and Brad puts the phone in his hand. He checks the number and asks John, "Is your number 123 for 567890? "It is," John said. The general then proceeded to get a serious look on his face. "Brad, are you a cadet?" "I'm being considered for an appointment," Brad said. The general nodded. "I suggest you pay your bill, tip in full, and apologize to the staff for your behavior." He said to Brad, "I also suggest withdrawing your name as soon as possible to save yourself the embarrassment. Keeping his head down, Brad paid the bill, meekly apologized, and left with his sycophants. The general and his entourage patiently waited for the table to be cleared and set. They proceeded to have a nice meal, leaving a generous tip and apologizing for people like Brad. Lucy proceeded to have a wonderful Brad-free career.